Roger, thanks for dropping by. This kitchen session is, well, partly similar and totally unusual in a couple of cases. This is my Miltoniopsis, nicknamed Donald, actually her Alexander, and it's not doing very well. It's been in its pot a little while and the latest growths are high. Consequently, these roots are just dehydrating, and for this sort of plant I don't want to repot it this time of year, but if I leave it now it's going to suffer even more later. I mean, this growth here has actually got 3 new growths coming out of it, so of all the times to catch that part of the plant, now is it. So that's one. Get it out of the pot in a minute. And then the other 2 are my 2 Draculas. This is the one I've recently got at Burnham's on my day trip. This is Bella. And the Orchid Society meeting yesterday was a bit of a revolution. The guy there is a bit of a Dracula specialist. He has a massive collection of hundreds and hundreds and professes to have virtually every species in cultivation. Now that's quite an achievement, because some of them are incredibly rare in cultivation because they are incredibly rare in the wild. One particular plant which he had, he showed pictures of like a mountain range, montane forest area. You could see the cloud hanging like in the valleys going up towards the hills. You could see snow on the top of the hills. This is how cool they grow. And this particular Dracula, he pointed onto the picture and said, this little valley here and this even smaller one here is the only place this Dracula has ever been found, and that part of the forest has now been cleared, so it's gone. So a lot of these are in real trouble because of the part of the world they live in. And although they live in areas which you would think, well, nobody's ever going to play around with that, you know, it's sort of up on a mountainside and they're still clearing them and planting crops, mainly palm oil. So we really need a lot of that, don't we? But in poorer countries you have to make money how you can. Anyway, very good talk, and he grows his in a certain way and it sounded good, so I'm going to have a go at it. So first job, I'm going to put that one to one side because that one's still quite moist and stands upright, whereas this one is so light it keeps falling over. This is my other Dracula. This is Pusilla, or Pusilla, however you want to call it, and this is in a tiny bit of moss with some lumpy bits in the bottom which give no weight to the pot whatsoever, and this pot has now got so big, the plant has got so big it will not stand up. It's constantly falling over, and as a consequence it's getting on my thrupneys. The moss is damp and it's not too far gone. Not too far gone at all. I can't remember whether I actually repotted this. I'd have to go and have a look at my notes. But nonetheless it has some reasonable roots, and the way I'm going to plant this, I expect it's going to have some very reasonable roots very quickly. Given all the information I got, when I catch hold of somebody like that at a meeting that's doing a talk that has a specialised subject, shall we say, that I have an interest in, because I must admit I was overjoyed because the talk was advertised as Dendrochilums, which I wouldn't have had a huge amount of interest in. I mean, people still give good talks even if it's on a subject you're not that keen on, but nonetheless, as soon as I saw the slide up on the screen which said Draculas, I thought, right, we're in. And after he'd given his talk I thought, well, this guy's been growing Draculas in his way a hell of a long time, has a massive collection, it must work. Simple as that. So we'll give it a go. I don't need to get every bit of this moss out, you'll see why later. So that's one. There's some dead roots in the centre, as is often the case with a plant. Some viable roots, not a huge amount. You can see a lot of these are just pulling away. Yeah, you got that sort of stringy bit. There's enough there to keep that plant going, especially the way it's about to get planted. A couple of old flower spikes in there. No new ones, unfortunately. Not yet, anyway. Luckily, both of these Draculas, that can go in the sink now and have a bit of a rinse off. And moss isn't too bad. Right, let's have a look at this one then. As I say, I've recently got this one from Burnham's, and again we've got the polystyrene jammed in the bottom of the pot that won't even come out. I have to get that out because my old compost I throw on the garden under the hedge basically, and I don't want these white bits of polystyrene all in amongst the plants, so I always keep them separate. They go in a separate bin. Ah, now this has got some nice live roots. I did actually upend this pot in the nursery before I brought it home. I thought it's quite expensive, I'm not taking that home if it's got naff roots. So I turned the plant out of its pot, and hey presto, it did have some nice roots. And that moss is starting to go, so good. This is a good time then. Again, I'll just give this a quick rinse under the sink. There's a few bits of bark in there as well, and yeah, that's not too bad. Quick rinse off. Some nice roots coming out from the base here, some with active green tips, and as usual. Do you know, it's so rare now to buy a plant. I'm not saying one of your own plants that you've, you know, repotted yourself and grown on over a period of time, but nearly every plant you buy nowadays has got a fair amount of dead roots on it. Now with this one at Burnham's, whether they've grown these from young plants and grown them on, I don't know, but looking at the contents of the pot, this does look like it was potted by Burnham's, so the amount of dead roots is less, because obviously some would have been taken off when it was repotted, and since then it's grown on, so not quite so bad as some that you get. But it's one of the worst failings with orchids, you know, people who have orchids that just fail and they never really know why. And half the time is the fact that you bought one with a lousy root system, and often you don't even know, and you sort of, you know, a lot of people don't repot immediately, some do. I mean, I used to repot religiously as soon as I got the plant home. I'm not quite so keen on doing it immediately now. I like to give the plant a little bit of time to acclimatise to where it's going to live. Otherwise you give it two shocks. You take it out of its home, shock number one, transport it, another partial shock probably, and then you put it in a totally different environment. And that's a shock, you know, it's a change of environment. And it doesn't really matter how close it is, it will still be a change. And if the plant's already not in very good condition because it's got a poor root system, you've just given it, you know, quite a little setback potentially. But if you can get one that's got a good root system, the repotting does very little to it, and it should get going quite well. Right, you give that one a rinse. I'll get the other one out of the pot because this one is going to make a mess. The other two weren't too bad because it's just moss, but this is bark. I doubt if I'm going to find an excellent root system under here. I doubt very much at all. Miltonias is two plants. Irrespective, it didn't want to let go. See, these roots are spindly. They're not good. They're not good. I was just saying, there's a horrible woody stem at the base there, but that's that bulb there. Well, that's coming off. That's obviously long since gone. It's not soggy, but it's rotted off. There's another base of one that once was, so that can come off. There we go. And then what we need to do is gently tease, and I mean gently, all of these old sheaths away, because that's where the new growths will come from, and when they come out, if there's nothing in their way, their media will go straight. See, that growth has actually gone, so oh well, never mind. This is the bit I'm after, but I want to try and get as many old sheaths off as possible so that when the new roots do come out, they've got the best chance of getting in some media. There's got an old sheath in there. It's an old flower spike that once was. Right, that's now not a bad little plant, and even though these roots are a bit dry here, they're not that bad. They will branch. These little ones here are capable of pushing on, but they won't do it sat in the air. That's just not how these plants grow. Right, I'll give that piece a bit of a clean up. This is its latest new growth here, but it also has another one just pushing out. Now, in the not too distant future, when this, where's my camera? When this little growth here, down in behind that bract leaf, whatever you want to call it, lower leaf, when that gets going a bit, it's going to try and push some roots out, and that's going to be in the way. Now, they will squeeze round and go down, but a lot of them will go straight up the base of that leaf and head up into the sky. So as soon as that little growth doesn't need so much protection around the base of it, I will tease that off so that the new roots go straight down. So that's that one. Where's my other piece? Now this one is currently going mad with the new growths. The old growth isn't very good. What sort of root system have we got on this? Not very good. This really is not the best of times to repot this sort of plant. But if I don't catch it now, if I leave it till a good time, I'll probably have lost the few roots I have got, and then it'll be a bad time again. I think I'm going to take that one off because that new growth is pushing on quite nicely, and that's exactly where the roots are going to come out from. They do tease off quite easily. This new growth here is already exposed, so that's two, and the other one's pushing up the centre. If I try and pull that leaf off to expose this one, I will damage that. So that's staying exactly where it is. So not a brilliant root system, but with this base in a suitable media, this is where the roots are going to come. And we'll see how we get on with that. Not brilliant. Right, I'll have a clean up, get my stuff, and we'll get potting, or whatever it's called. Okay, I don't think you've ever seen me use baskets before, but they are relatively traditional for Draculas because an awful lot of them push their spike out through the bottom of the plant. But what you won't have seen me do is use that. If you remember, my live sphagnum moss got collected last year and has been sat in the garden ever since, just doing its thing. But that's what's happening. I'm not only going to plant them in live sphagnum moss, I'm going to stand them in a tray of water. And then I will change the water every now and again, or top it up as necessary, and they will effectively wick up through the live sphagnum moss. And having seen enough video now of how a lot of these Draculas grow, they're classed as epiphytes, and yes, they do grow on tree branches, but where they grow they're always in a lot of moss, and a lot of them are not in the moss on the branch, they're growing in the moss that's hanging down from the branch, so they're only loosely attached to the moss that's hanging, they're not really on the tree. And this guy worked out that if that's how a lot of them want to grow, they obviously just need their roots in wet moss, and they're happy. You don't really need to attach. They're not heavy plants, you know, it's not like a cattleya with a dozen pseudobulbs that weighs a ton. They're quite lightweight. So I've got some of these, they're like seed trays, but they have no holes in, so they hold water. I got a lot of these for my Ceramis project, which was a miserable failure, but nonetheless that's why I've got some, because you wouldn't normally buy a seed tray with no holes in. You drown your plants, those sort of plants anyway. So this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to try it, and quite honestly, if it works, then my Masdevallias are going like this as well. That will mean I'll have to get some more baskets. Right, which plants are which here? There's 3 baskets there, even though there's only 2 plants, but I've decided to take the bull by the horns, in for a penny and all that stuff, and do my 3rd Masdevallia Dracula cross, as it's in the same category. So yes, that looks like a tiny little basket, but it doesn't matter. And this guy said, whatever you do, do not push the moss in tight. Just put it in loosely and put it loosely around the plant, and that's all they need, because they're going to stand in water. So this is nearly, well, I suppose it is, strictly speaking, this is hydroponics growing. It can't be really classed as anything else, but for these plants apparently it works a treat. They love it. But he said, for goodness sake, don't pack the moss in tight, because you shut the air out. They like air around their roots nonetheless. And he said that, well, he didn't say, this is something I know anyway from a previous life. Live sphagnum moss has got incredible properties, sterilising properties. If you get caught out in, well, let's just say out in the open, and you get a wound or an injury, grab a handful of this and chuck it straight on the wound. It doesn't even matter if it looks dirty, don't worry, just get it in there. It has amazing sterilising properties. It's quite incredible. You always worry about cleaning the bits out of the hole in your leg later. But it'll tide you over. It'll keep your wound sterile. So the bonus is that you shouldn't get any manky bits in round your roots, because they're being permanently sterilised by this live sphagnum. So that's it. That's not firmly packed in there. It's firm enough to hold the plant upright, and because of the properties of the moss, I don't have to worry too much about being quite near the base. Normally I like to leave my base a little bit exposed to stop any rot, but this stuff isn't going to rot. The worst thing that can happen with this is it'll dry out. Now, sphagnum moss, where I collected mine from, that's one done, I'll do the other one while I'm gassing. Where I collect mine from is in very, very deep pools, but some of those pools aren't deep, some are quite shallow, and after the drought that we've had, some of those pools will have dried out, because they're not getting fed by springs or anything like that. It's mostly just rainwater, and as a consequence it will look like all the sphagnum on the surface is dead. It's brown and shriveled. As soon as the rains come, you go back 2 weeks later and it's all green again. It's not dead. It's effectively dormant. So even if this did happen to inadvertently dry out, which I will do my best not to let happen, it doesn't matter. It will come back to life, because it has life in it. Unlike that other type of moss we use, there is no life in that. Even though some people think it's zombie moss and it comes back to life, it doesn't. It's dead. It's never going to live again. But what it does do is get algae on it and turn green. So it has the impression that it's living. It's not at all. It's dead as a doornail. Whereas this stuff isn't. There's another grower that I know quite well. Started doing this at the beginning of this year, because he had some sphagnum moss growing outside, and he brought it inside to see if it would actually grow in his growing areas, and it continued to grow, although he said it used a hell of a lot more water inside than it did outside. But he's now growing this way for his Masdevallias and his Draculas. And I've seen his come to shows, and they are doing incredibly well. So I've not only heard somebody talking about it, you know, a long-term experienced grower with a massive collection, I've also got a grower I know that's doing the same thing, and in addition to that I've seen proper videos of people actually out in those montane forests doing surveys, and the video we actually watched actually showed them discovering a new species there and then as they were going along. Now they could have prepared that earlier and found it the day before and just gone back again with the camera, but to all intents and purposes it looked like a new species was discovered at that point. And given their very, very local existence, you know, the fact that one valley could hold a single species that's not found anywhere else in the world, we've still got some to find. There's still places that people haven't got to yet. And worse than that, there's places that have had those forest areas cleared before we got there. So they're lost and will never be known, which is very, very sad. So that's it. That's how they're going to go. Yeah. Live moss, and they're going to sit in a tray of water. They'll be sat in about 1 centimetre of water, and that moss will never dry out. And you did say when the root systems get going, quite a few of them will grow into your tray of water. Well, anybody who grows, you know, the water culture way or that sort of methodology, you know that once your roots adapt, some of them will come out the bottom of the pot and live in the water. And those that grow in just water, in glasses and things like that, you know only too well that the roots can survive in the water. It's quite amusing actually, because the guy actually brought a plant in onto the tables at the meeting yesterday in a glass of water. And even there, with the proof under their nose, people still looked up and said, "You can't grow orchids standing in water." Even when they're standing there looking at the plant growing in a glass of water. And the guy's telling them that it's been in there years, you know. Oh dear. Some people just won't change. Some people won't change. I mean, I have no intentions of growing that way. It doesn't appeal to me. It doesn't mean to say it doesn't work just because I don't want to do it. There's more than enough evidence. People have got their own channels where that's how they grow. All different types of orchids, and they're growing, they're doing okay, they adapt. I'm running out of green stuff. I tell you what too, as is in nature, this is nothing different, the bottom of this tray is a bit niffy. Yeah, well, if you think about it, sphagnum's growing on the top of what is a standing water pool. Yeah, now okay, it gets refreshed by rain now and again, but obviously the deeper water is going to be stagnant. So what I will do with my tray while I've got it in here is empty the water out that's in it and put some fresh RO water in, since we don't seem to going to be having any rain in the foreseeable future. Literally, there doesn't seem to be any rain around for some time. So just going to settle that in, and I think that will do. Where the new growths are, I've got moss up round the base okay. I don't see as I've, oh, hang on, I've missed a bit there. There's a little bare bit. Get a little bit tucked in there. And that's it. That's what they're going to live like for a while. And I need to go and get a tray to put the water in. Unfortunately, these are the only size trays I've got, and there's only, at the moment, there's only going to be 3 plants standing in there. It's going to look a bit empty. Plus, I've now got to find room to stand it. But the guy said, quite honestly, as far as the Draculas are concerned, in his grow area, they go on the floor. He said they get so little light, it would almost be classed as dark. He said they just don't need the light. Where they come from is dense forest, and they don't grow right up in the trees. They grow down near the bottom of the trees, and sometimes even onto the floor, you know, into the leaf litter. So they're not even always growing as epiphytes. And again, it's in the film. So they don't need a lot of light. And it may be that mine have been getting a bit too much light. I don't think I've had these long enough to say why won't you bloom, because I've only just gone into Draculas this year. Right, let's get my doodahs back in. That's it's Mastrovalia Vecchiana. Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? The guy said that they have found Vecchiana growing almost on the snow line, where it's actually getting down to freezing, and they're surviving at those sort of low temperatures. So when we say a cool grower, we mean it. And that's crossed with Dracula Hallei, or Hallei, however you say it. Vecchiana I know well. I have tried growing that a couple of times and it won't have it. It's just too warm where I am. And Dracula Hallei, I haven't actually looked that up, but that's what it is. So we'll tuck our tag in. There's a puddle of water everywhere now that's come out of the moss. And that was Dracula Bella. That's that one. Tuck that down in there. And the last one is the Dracula Pusilla. It's P-U-S-I-L-L-A, Pusilla. That's got to be said, hasn't it? I can't see how the hell you can say that any other way. So that's my two Dracula Pure and a Dracula Mastrovalia Cross. And that's how I'm going to try them for a while. I'm not going to show repotting the Miltoniopsis. You've seen me repot those sort of flipping things so many times. It'll just be small bark, heavy on the moss, broken up sphagnum moss, and in the smallest pot I can get away with without the plant keep falling over. So that's that done. See you next time, and there will be updates obviously, because this is now, it's like an experiment, although it's not an experiment without a hell of a lot of backup. So we'll see how they go.